In early Ottoman folklore, the story of the capture of Eidos Castle begins with a dream. The daughter of the local Greek commander is stranded in a dark pit until a handsome stranger appears, rescues her, and dresses her in silk. She wakes up, unable to understand what the vision means. Soon after, a Turkish army arrives to lay siege to the castle. Looking out from the battlements, the girl spots the commander of the invading forces and recognizes him as the man from her dream. Believing it to be fate, she writes a letter, wraps it around a stone, and tosses it to the besiegers. That night, she secretly lowers a rope down the castle walls so the commander can climb up and open the gates. It is a neat foundational story. But if you look at the earliest surviving Ottoman chronicles, you will find two drastically different versions of this exact same event. The older account, written by the historian Ashik Pashazadeh, records a deeply religious legend. In his text, the handsome stranger in the dream was the Prophet Muhammad. The man who climbed the rope was a pious holy warrior, known as a Ghazi, a man driven strictly by religious devotion to expand the borders of Islam. A few decades later, another historian named Neshri wrote the story down again, but he made a few edits. He completely removed the prophet from the dream. Instead, Neshri framed the event as a secular, romantic tale of a lovesick townsgirl who drops a message to the youth of her infatuation. In the 14th century, the Ottomans operated as small, highly motivated bands of frontier raiders. By the time Neshri was writing in the 15th century, the state had become a complex society of bureaucrats and scholars. To his urban readers, the raw, mystical spirit of the original Ghazi warriors felt like an unbelievable relic of a bygone age. These two versions of the Eidos myth offer a window into two different stages of the Ottoman state. One was a scrappy frontier emirate, defined by holy war. The other was a burgeoning power, beginning to trade its tribal roots for the structures of a professional empire. Scaling up from frontier raids to global dominance required military engineering. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror captured Constantinople by deploying heavy gunpowder artillery and massive siege engines to shatter the city's ancient defenses. The immediate conversion of the city's most famous basilica into a mosque, dominated by massive calligraphic shields, signaled the Ottomans' arrival on the world stage. By the early 16th century, under the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, the zealous, independent warriors of the past were replaced by a pragmatic, highly structured imperial machine designed to govern vast territories. The nerve center of this state was the Divan, a bureaucratic cabinet where state policy, taxation, and diplomacy were debated and executed by a sprawling administration of officials. This diagram illustrates how they built their new army. Through the Devshirme system, Christian boys were taken from the provinces, moved through a rigorous training pipeline, and emerged as the Janissaries, a formalized, elite slave army, loyal only to the Sultan. This rigid, highly organized institutional machinery allowed the Ottomans to efficiently rule across multiple continents, leaving their tribal origins behind. As the empire's borders expanded, its wealth flowed back into the capital, fueling a cultural explosion that mirrored Neshri's worldly view of Ottoman history. The state stamped its identity on the skyline. Master architects erected multi-domed structures with towering minarets, like the Suleymaniye Mosque, designed to project absolute authority. Inside the capital, the Sultan heavily patronized the arts. Ottoman lyric poetry blossomed, and a distinct, highly educated court culture emerged, drawing scholars from across the Islamic world. Alongside this cultural blossoming, internal political power began to shift. The imperial harem evolved from a private domestic space into a hub of immense political influence, where successions were brokered and alliances forged. No single figure embodied this new reality better than Suleiman's wife, Roxolana. Originally a captive, she rose to become the Sultan's legal wife and a dominant political operator in her own right. By the peak of Suleiman's reign, the Ottoman state operated as a cosmopolitan world power. Decisions once made on horseback by frontier chieftains were now handled through the intricate networks of the court, the harem, and the imperial bureaucracy. Over the following centuries, the same massive, complex institutions that allowed the Ottomans to reach their peak eventually hardened into rigid shackles. The ulama, the powerful class of religious scholars, increasingly looked backward. As European nations rapidly industrialized, the Ottoman scholarly class often rejected Western modernization and technological advancement, fostering a period of intellectual stagnation. The military suffered a similar fate. The Janissary Corps, once the most elite and disciplined fighting force in Europe, slowly degenerated into a corrupt, avaricious political faction concerned primarily with protecting its own wealth. This chart tracks the 16th to 19th centuries. The rising line shows Janissary revolts as they routinely mutinied and deposed reforming sultans. The downward trajectory shows the consequence: massive losses of wealth and territory, as the unadaptable Ottoman military fell to modernized European armies. By 1826, Sultan Mahmud II concluded that the empire's survival required the total destruction of its founding military corps. In the auspicious incident, the Sultan deployed modernized European artillery units, firing directly into the Janissary barracks in the heart of Istanbul. The surviving mutineers were slaughtered in the streets, imprisoned, or exiled. It was a desperate, bloody surgery intended to force modernization, but it came far too late to reverse the empire's long-term decline. The Ottomans began with a simple purpose that forged an empire out of the Anatolian frontier, but as they expanded, they overcomplicated their present. The rigid institutions required to scale their empire became the exact forces that guaranteed its collapse.